And good morning. It is time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And now your host, Mike Hewitt.
Hey, good morning. We're going to have a pretty packed show today, but before we get going, let me welcome Jim Riley back to the show.
Back in the USSA, baby. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be back in this great country.
You had a pretty big whirlwind tour of where?
Italy, one stop in Turkey, and quite a few stops in Greece and the Greek Isles.
Listen, later in the show, I'm really wanting to delve into that because some of the easy softball questions I want to run by you, Jim Riley, so you can start boning up and preparing, is the uber left in America would love to have America be more like Europe.
You know, isn't that the truth? We hear that all the time.
We really do.
Yeah.
Jeepers, we should be more like them. How come we're not like them? Now, of the two places, where would you rather be, here or there?
There is absolutely no comparison. One of the I've said this on the other shows before, but if you really want to get a sense of how wonderful the United States is and how wonderful West Michigan is, leave the country for a week or two, go to a different country. Even I would even say even going to Canada, but certainly if coming back from Europe, there are wonderful things in Europe. The visiting, the architecture, and all sorts of wonderful things to see. But there are so many inconveniences, and it's so sad to see all the unemployed people everywhere, trash everywhere, and to come back to this county, this state, this country. It is just wonderful, and it makes you just feel that much better to be here.
What's an inconvenience?
Well, the inconvenience is in many places they don't take credit cards because, as one of our guides said, a gentleman who owned quite a few Mercedes, he had a good-size tourism business, guiding the business. He said, we don't trust the government, and the government doesn't trust us. And they are fearful that if they take a credit card, they will not get their money back from the banks. Of course, the cost on most things is significantly higher, which is why the only people in the restaurants and taking the tours and all are from other countries, because the folks within those countries generally don't have the money to take advantage of it. And there are lots of other things like the toilets are quite a bit different in Europe, even in Italy. Water closets, they call them everywhere.
What do you mean different? How different can a toilet be?
Well, if you've ever been out to an outdoor concert and you've stumbled into a porta potty, quite a bit like that in many cases. But waiting in lines for things, the roads, of course, are very, very narrow, which to some is very quaint. Everybody's driving tiny, tiny little cars, like that what they call the smart car. And, of course, most people don't really have access to their own personal vehicles. It's just, it's wonderful to visit. It's sort of like going to New York, New York is great, but you wouldn't want to live there.
How do they travel if they don't have their own vehicles?
Well, they've got very extensive and relatively inexpensive trains and bus systems, which are quite nice in the sense that you can go from here to there. To that extent, it's nice, but, of course, none of these systems pay for themselves, and they are part of the reason that the various countries are unable to handle their international debts and pay their bills. So, on one hand, they do have some nice things, although, if you're carrying anything, if you want to go to the airport, you might be able to get there by train, but, my golly, it's very, very inconvenient to do so.
And you mentioned before we went on the air that TSA is a lot better now than they used to be.
No, I did not mention that. Travel, again, I do not get it. Anyone who's traveled lately within the United States knows, of course, that the transportation safety. I don't even know what TSA stands for now, but it has made traveling much more complex. You got to take your shoes off, your belt off, darn near everything.
This is TSA overseas? TSA?
Well, this is TSA in the United States. It's gotten worse.
Right.
But in Europe, it's like 3 times worse.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's why we want to be more like them.
Exactly why we do not.
Listen, folks, we've got a special guest on this morning, a former chairperson of the U.S. Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, former Congressman Pete Hoekstra. Pete, welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Hey, Mike. It's great to be with you. Thank you.
Listen,
Good morning, Mike. Jim Riley's here also.
Listen, Pete, I had an opportunity to go through your book, and that's what we're talking about. It's a book titled "The Architects of Disaster: The Destruction of Libya," and I got to tell you, candidly, first off, I write, and one of the things I normally don't do is I normally don't read other books while I'm writing my own, just because I don't think I'm smart enough to keep everything separate. But having said that, I got into your book and I couldn't stop myself. So I ended up I read through it last evening. What I liked about it was first, typically when I read these kind of books, they're a little bit weighted and they're hard to read. This read like someone was talking to me. So I just got to applaud you for your writing on it. But the information is mind-blowing sad, actually.
Well, thank you very much for the compliments. And what we did try to do with the book was make it readable to the average person, someone who is not, following politics every day, or someone who's not following the threat from radical jihadism every day, but wants to know more about it, especially as they see what's happening in the Middle East, as they see what is happening in Libya, to see what's happening to people of faith around the world. And so we wanted to make it understandable so that people could really comprehend the threat that's out there, and also get some kind of an understanding as to how we confront this threat, contain it, and ultimately defeat it, because it wants to destroy Western civilization. It wants to destroy who we are.
Pete, I'm somewhat of a policy wonk, and so I follow a lot of these things. I thought closely, but reading your book and then contrasting that to how the media reports what's going on, frankly, was alarming to me. That so much of what I believe, at least, is common sense that they should be talking about, they're not. I think that's dangerous.
It really is dangerous, because, what we have seen in Libya, and everybody remembers the bad Muammar Gaddafi, the terrorist-sponsored, the state of Libya, which facilitated and planned to shoot down a Pan Am 103 and other terrorist activities around the world. But in 2003, after 20 years of pressure by Republican and Democrat administrations, Gaddafi came in from the cold, and for 8 to 9 years did everything that America asked him to do. He got rid of his nuclear weapons program. He paid reparations to the victims' families of terrorism that his country had inspired. And then he worked with us against radical jihadists. He was still an imperfect person. He was still a mad dog, but he was our mad dog at that point in time. And he kept the lid on the garbage can of radical jihadists in northern Africa. And then this administration, when they decided to engage with radical jihadists to overthrow Gaddafi, because they believed they could manage the radical jihadists, they thought they could trust them, and we found out what a huge mistake that was. Because rather than having northern Africa be stable, it's now destabilized and exporting terrorism and weapons throughout the world.
Two things. First off, reading the sections here from your book regarding Muammar Gaddafi was an eye opener. And I'm not endorsing him, obviously, or his practice,
right,
but it takes that kind of person to keep the lid on the trash can tight. And that said, one of the things I find just unnerving about the current administration is they seem to have an uncanny knack for endorsing and trying to do business with not just contemporary enemies, but people who have been historically against and untrustworthy, against our type of freedom, and untrustworthy in terms of all the way back to our own founding. We've never been able to successfully deal with the people that, for some reason, President Obama thought was going to be a walk in the park with.
No, that's exactly right. The threat from radical jihadists, it's been a threat that's been around. People talk about the Barbary pirates off the coast of Tripoli. You'll know, the Marine Corps, him from the shores of Tripoli, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. That was when they were fighting Barbary pirates. And I was talking to somebody the other day. He says, I don't call them Barbary pirates anymore. He says those are radical jihadists.
That's exactly right.
They attacked our Navy. They attacked our merchant marines. And those types of things. So we've been fighting them, and that is one of the points, Mike, towards the end of the book where I talk about lessons learned. We need to understand the threat that is out there, because until we understand the threat, we won't be able to defeat it. And under both President Bush and President Obama, we've shied away from identifying this as as a religious war. It doesn't matter what we think, Mike, but what we do know is that there are a lot of people who are attacking the United States, and they are coming at the United States under the umbrella of Islam. And that is a controversial statement for some. I'm not saying I'm characterizing it that way. All I'm saying is there are people in the war who are characterizing this as is Islam's fight with the rest of the world. Right.
What from our side on that, from the United States' side, and I'm obviously a layman here, Pete, but my interpretation is that it's not a Democrat or a Republican issue, that we've been embracing political correctness since well before Vietnam. And the result of that is that it, again, as a layman, it doesn't appear that we're ever able to complete any of the missions that we set about doing, whether by happenstance or purpose.
Like I said, I think the interesting thing about taking a look at Gaddafi, and I had an opportunity to meet with him 3 times between 2003 and 2009. The transformation of Gaddafi, the transformation of Libya, is actually a phenomenal success story. We took someone who was sponsoring terrorism around the world, and we flipped him. He started killing jihadists. He started coordinating and planning with the United States and with other folks who were opposed to radical Islam. He flipped sides, and rather than the U.S. sticking with that, we flipped sides and we started engaging with radical jihadists. It's unbelievable. We snatched defeat out of the jaws of victory. We had Gaddafi won. We had Northern Africa stabilized, and we decided that wasn't good enough.
What do you think the arching rationale was from the Obama administration to embrace the other side? From my standpoint, Pete, just a little insight, and I think I touched it on a moment ago, but to me it looks like they're embracing the other side on almost every issue possible, from Israel to this and everything in between.
Well, remember when in 2007, when the president was campaigning for office, he said that the day that I am sworn in as president, the country and the world will see America differently. That he was bigger than this country, but in reality, the world didn't see America differently. They saw we had a new president, but the country is more than our president. It is our values. It's our standards. It's our economic power. It's our military power, and all of these types of things. And these countries didn't see America differently. He believed that radical jihadists would view America differently now because we had a president that understood Islam. Well, the radical jihadists still hate us.
Right.
And what they sensed was vulnerability and weakness. The president believed he could work with these folks. And like I said, that you could work with them, that you could manage them, but most importantly, that you could trust them. And you can't trust them.
I'm reading the excerpt that's in your book that is quoting President Obama. I truly believe the day I'm inaugurated, not only the country looks at itself differently, but the world looks at America differently. And it goes on, and you've quoted him. But when I read that, it's almost delusional, other than the fact that he is at least partly right, although it's probably not what he had in mind. The world does look at America differently, and he's got America questioning itself. These are not healthy things.
No, and what they did see America, they saw us differently. Because what they saw rather than resolve, what they perceived was indecision, rather than strength, what they saw was weakness. And in that part of the world, when people see weakness, they take advantage of it. And this is why you see what has happened in Yemen, what has happened in Libya, what happened in Egypt, and now it's the dangerous events in Syria and in Iraq.
You offer a quote in the book, Pete, from Gaddafi to President Obama. You will regret it if you take a step toward intervening in our internal affairs. Do you think Gaddafi was telling him that if you take the lid off, this is going to explode in your face?
No, exactly. I've met with a lot of the rulers in that part of the world. I had met with Mubarak. I've met with Bashar Assad. I've met with the leadership in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. And remember, Gaddafi had been fighting these people for 40 years. He knew exactly who they were, and he knew that if his regime was eliminated, he was sending America a very clear signal: be careful what you hope for. You will regret it. He knew how hard it was to control these folks. He also knew what would happen if they were not controlled, and it happened. I mean, they partnered with these groups partnered with the United States. They have American blood on their hands. These were the same groups and individuals who fought against us in Afghanistan and Iraq. They had American blood on their hands, and when they partnered with us to get rid of Gaddafi, but as soon as Gaddafi was gone, they turned on us. And I think many of these groups and many of these individuals that we fought with to get rid of Gaddafi are the same ones that attacked us in Benghazi. Oh,
I absolutely believe that. Listen, opposing voices in the United States will blame this entire drama on President Bush for taking military action in Iraq. Are they onto something, or are they just wrong? What do you think?
I think they're wrong. I mean, like I said, and I make it very clear in the book, Libya under Gaddafi, through Gaddafi, was a success story because Republicans and Democrats had a consistent foreign policy of ostracizing this leader, and he flipped. It wasn't Republican, it wasn't Democrat. What we see with the Obama administration is he turned American foreign policy on its heels when he decided to embrace radical jihadists. It was not a policy that any American president, Republican or Democrat, had ever even remotely considered. What we're seeing today is are clearly some of the seeds were planted by Bush, but the bulk of what we're seeing in the world today is a result of the policies of this president, because he turned America's foreign policy head over heels and put us in a totally new direction.
That I think is an undeniable fact. Anyone that's willing to pause and earnestly look at these topics, absolutely agree. Now, I would be one of the people that say there's been missteps along the path, but this is way more than a misstep. What we've seen in the last 7 years, it's an absolute right down from affronting Great Britain, all the way down to this and everything in between. It's been opposite of what history and common sense says that we should have been doing.
Let me add one thing here. We're using the name Barack Obama, and certainly he's the president of the United States. But the person who was deeply involved in the decision-making that led us to where we are now, and to probably led you to write your book, Congressman, is at the time Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. We have a situation coming up within the next year where we will be voting on the next president of the United States. And one of the reasons that you would vote for or against a politician, in particular the president of the United States, is, of course, their history of making wise decisions, having common sense and a history of making decisions that have panned out. I think it's important that we remember that one of the main drivers of this particular disastrous policy, a policy that's likely to get worse just going forward, is Hillary Clinton. And she's asking for the votes of millions upon millions of Americans. And we really ought to start screaming bloody murder about Hillary, because this is where she was the point of the spear.
You're exactly right. That's why I have both Secretary of State Clinton and President Obama on the cover of the book. They're both responsible for this disastrous foreign policy in Libya, and they need to be held accountable. I think it has been a terrible policy. And you'll remember a couple of things, she testified and said, we came, we saw, he died, talking about what we did in Libya. We came to Libya, we saw Libya, and Gaddafi died, claiming that as a big victory statement. At the Democratic debate, she said, well, Libya, implying Libya was a success because they had elections, and it's kind of like, excuse me, Madam Secretary, yeah, they had an election, but it's not exactly stability. It is now an ungoverned area. There are at least two different governments that are claiming to be the legitimate government of Libya, and neither one of them, if you put the two together, they still wouldn't control all of Libya. And it has become a major exporter of fighters. It has become a major exporter of weapons to radical jihadist groups throughout northern Africa and into the Middle East, into Syria, and into Iraq. I was very disappointed that last week, Thursday, on the Benghazi hearing, where no one really asked her about her foreign policy that led to this chaos, that led to what happened in Benghazi, that led to an environment where you would have radical jihadists who would be well-trained, well-armed, who could actually successfully carry out an attack against an American ambassador and kill that American ambassador. She's never been held accountable.
Amen on that, Pete. One of the most frustrating parts about these types of dramas that unfold in front of us is that it almost seems to be media soundbite, when the reality of it is that people are dying needlessly because of misguided decisions. And I mean, death is pretty. It's more than just a political inconvenience, to quote a former vice president. Listen, Pete Hoekstra, we're out of time, but I just want to wrap it up by saying, genuinely, I appreciate you writing this book. Anyone that wants to be to come to an understanding of what's going on needs to take the time to sit down and read this.
It's available. I got to just jump in here. It's available on Amazon, but it is not available on Kindle. There's a little button you can click to say, I'd like to see this on Kindle, because this is an important book.
It's supposed to be on Kindle in the next couple of days.
I'll be buying it, Pete.
All right. And the other thing is all the proceeds go to the Investigative Project on Terrorism. They don't go to me. They go to an organization that has been at the forefront of this fight and is going to continue to be at the forefront of this fight moving forward.
Very, very nice. Pete Hoekstra, thank you very much for your service. I appreciate you, sir.
Always good to talk to you. Thank you, guys.
Okay, folks,
thank you.
We'll be right back, folks.
And now back to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And now back to your host as well, of course. That's why we're here.
I'm having a great show today. I'm having a lot of fun.
Mike Hewitt.
I am. Listen, on the line with us is Andrew Kohlinger of VoteSpotter. Andrew, welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Thanks, Mike. It's great being here.
Listen, tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what is VoteSpotter. I know it's an app for smartphones, but tell me what it is.
Well, at its heart, it's a nonpartisan tool that empowers citizens to get involved in the political process in a new way with just a few simple taps of their mobile phones.
Give me an idea of what that means literally. So if I just want to double check. So say I'm wanting to find out what Senator Arlen Meekoff is doing. I can just tap on it, watch him, and watch what he's working on in Lansing?
Yeah, it's going to all depend on where you live. So that's the beauty of VoteSpotter, is that the first thing you do when you open it is that you put in your address, and we actually tell you who your elected officials are, which I know for somebody like you already know who that is, but for some other people, they might not necessarily know that. So that's the first key to what VoteSpotter does differently, is we tell you who your legislator is. And then beyond that, we do, kind of throughout the year, we educate users through alerts and simplified bill summaries about what their elected officials are doing and how they're voting, both in Lansing and in D.C. And then the real cool part is that on your phone, you're able to basically engage with your legislator. You're able to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on how you think they voted, and then you have the opportunity to email them or call them with your opinion as well.
How are they responding to that?
some of them like it, some of them don't. Actually, we talked to a couple of people up on Mackinac Island when we were there. I think you were there as well.
Sure.
Some of them actually get on, and when they put in their address, they themselves come up for their, being their elected officials. So they've told us that they like getting on there and basically seeing, hey, so many of my constituents actually agree or disagree with my vote. So, but then obviously some of them haven't been that reticent as well for obvious reasons.
Well, I would think that just the fact that someone is not only looking over their shoulder but reporting the votes it has to have some positive effect, at least from us, the taxpayer standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's all about empowering and engaging, and it's simply, we inform in order to empower and to engage. We're basically just simply trying to give people a new way to make their voice heard in a way that they haven't been able to before. So, I mean, it really comes down to if you think about technology and what it has transformed today. You look at companies like Amazon, which have transformed with technology the way we shop, or Facebook, which has transformed the way that we interact with our communities, or something even as simple as Uber, which transforms something like how you hail a taxi. It only makes sense to us at VoteSpotter that technology should also transform how people engage with politics, and making it a lot easier for people to make their voice heard and to actually directly engage with their elected officials.
Tell me, just my policy wonk hat's on a little bit tight here to this morning, so bear with me. But how are you folks collecting up the votes? You've got somebody in the various capitals, or how are you gathering the information?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a guy on staff who has spent 16 years covering the Michigan legislature in various capacities. And he is basically responsible for spotting 300 votes throughout the year that we think are important or newsworthy or relevant to the users' lives. And we summarize those in very plain English, point of view neutral, nuts and bolts. This is what the bill does. And then from there, it's up to the user to then express their opinion about how their legislator voted on that, and then to contact their legislator about that if they so desire.
Listen, I have to tell you something that's probably not a secret to my listeners. I don't think that I'm capable of giving an unbiased review of legislation, and I mean that honestly. When I read something, I don't know that I can reduce it down to nuts and bolts, because I just don't think I've got that in me. And I'm not trying to be flippant with you, but how does a person do that? And I mean that honestly. How do you extract your personality and your own agenda out of when you see something that's a train wreck or something that you think is good?
Well, you have to think of it in terms of almost like journalism or reporting.
That's exactly the point. Listen, don't take me wrong, but that's exactly the point. Anyone that's listened to this show has heard me whine about the fact that the media, whether it's Walter Cronkite in the old days or any of the talking heads on cable or broadcast now, when they report the news and they act as if that they're unbiased and have no opinion, listen, not only are they bold-faced liars, but it's really obvious that they're bold-faced liars because they have an agenda and an opinion. The only difference is I tell you up front, this is my opinion and my agenda.
Yeah, well, the key fact here is that right now, with most of the things that we're reporting, they're happening after the fact. They're happening after the vote. So that right there is an undisputable fact. We have the roll call. We have the actual bill text that they voted on, and it's simply we're starting from there and we're summarizing that to the best of our ability, making it, as I said before, just simply describing what they actually voted on, what it does and what it doesn't do.
Listen, just so folks know and that you know, I'm not attacking you. I've met you. I've read a fair amount about you before I had you on the show this morning, by the way, and I've got a great amount of respect for you and what you're doing. But when I look at it, and I'm not trying to belabor the point, but if I were reading something on prevailing wage as an example, a vote that happened, I have an agenda. So when I report it, I won't be able to extract that out. If you folks can do it, if you can truly be journalists in your reporting of it, man, I salute you, because it's a tough task.
It is, but like I said before, we think that with the advent of some of this new technology, it's something that we can do better than we have done before. And we're not claiming that we're perfect in any way, but we're trying to get that next iteration or that next step to being point of view neutral and just giving you nuts and bolts descriptions of what the bill does.
I listened to a tax-sponsored radio show on my way in this morning, and by the time I made my 40-minute drive, I thought my head was going to explode. It was so warped and uber left bias that, and I'm going, wow, that's journalism nowadays, huh? No kidding.
Well, and the thing you have to think about too is that there's journalists on both sides of right, left, and middle of center, and really it's the confluence of all of those that makes things balanced. So we try to be as middle of the road and unbiased as possible. But I mean, I'm sure you and all your listeners, as you just indicated, know. I mean, you can find different opinions on the same bill on both the left and the right for comparison as well.
Oh yeah, now and listen to that point. I don't think necessarily that a person's opinion is a fibber or dishonest. I just know that myself, I would not be able to not interpret it from Mike Hewitt's interpretation. And so, but all beyond that, a person, how do they get this app? What do they do? How do they get it? What's it look like on their phone, etc.?
Yeah, there's really a couple of simple ways they can do it. They can go to the Apple App Store or the Android Google Play Store and just search for VoteSpotter, VOTESPOTTER, which is one word. Or they can go online to www.votespotter.com/coalitions. Either one of those will direct them to the App Store, and once they download it, it'll open it up. It'll ask them for their address, quickly have them verify that is where they live, and then they'll be able to dive right into the app and see how their elected officials have been voting. Listen,
just on that point, folks, when I've heard some people push back on the address thing where they're trying to collect your information, etc. They're not. It is simply and just so that they know what your voting lineup is.
Yeah, it's exactly that. The best way to think about it is, your address is connected to your qualified voter file, more or less, which basically that's how we know which districts you live in, so that we can tell you who represents you. So that's the only reason why we ask you for your address.
Well, and let me just add to that. Of course, your address is easily available on the internet. It's available in telephone books. It's available in, as you said, any of the publicly available information that cities and counties and states have for voting. But I would just like to add to this that as you have been talking, I just went online, I downloaded the app, put in my address, and it was almost instantaneous. And I'm looking at the first one that popped up, and in this case it's our state senator, Jeff Hansen. And what I find interesting is there was a bill here called Ban Local Governmental Body Phone-In Voting passed 30-7 in the Senate, and it said that Hansen did not vote on this. This is really neat stuff, and it's very, very easy. A great site that you've got here, and easy to access.
Yeah, and you'll actually see that the most recent road bill that went through the House, we've got most, if not all, of the various bills associated with that are on there as well. So, and like you said, that's what we're basically trying to do, using technology to basically converge with public policy in a way that hasn't happened before, and make it a lot easier for people to, because I mean, especially for somebody like me, and in millennials like myself, and really anybody, we're just busy between family and friends and work. It's hard enough to be informed going into an election day, let alone during an actual state legislative process, which is when a lot of governing actually happens. And so that's the problem we're trying to solve, and we're trying to do that with technology.
Very, very, very cool. Jim?
Well, I just, again, an enlightened, educated, informed populace is important and critical to maintain the kind of government that we have lived with for over 200 years. And sometimes it's hard to get that information. You're making it easy. If people don't vote, and we sadly here in Muskegon County, we find elections are won with the 5, 6, 7% of the registered voters voting. Seems to me that if folks do have the information available, they can look at least their elected officials and use that information to motivate themselves to get out and vote.
Listen, Andrew, we're almost out of time. Do me one last favor before we go. Tell folks again, just mechanically, how and where do they get the app? What do they do?
Yeah. Once again, you can go to your Apple App Store or your Google Play Store on whatever device you have and just search for VoteSpotter, one word. Or you can go to our website, www.votespotter.com/coalitions.
Very, very nice. Listen, Andrew Kohlinger, thank you very, very much for what you do. I was teasing earlier. It is extreme. I'm with Jim on this. It's very important that there are folks that are gathering up information in the fashion that you guys are doing it. Excellent job, and I appreciate you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate your time.
Folks, we'll be right back after these messages.
And back to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And it is that time of the show that we transfer into the Enigma Report.
What do you think, Jim?
I'm just dazzled by the dulcet tones of our board operator here in his pronunciation and warbling of Enigma.
The problem with it is I'm always trying to be serious when I get to the Enigma Report, and I just can't. I love it.
I spoil it for you, don't I?
That was good. That was a great opening.
Oh, that is too funny. My sister out in Nevada, she says, my favorite part of the show is when you guys are just bantering around acting stupid. And I said, that's what the whole show is sometimes. So anyhow, listen, the Enigma, folks, the Enigma today, and that is Enigma, Jim Riley. The Enigma today is Jim Riley. You went to Europe. You traveled all over in places I have absolutely zero interest in going. But what the Enigma part is for me, and I'm hoping you'll explain it now that you're a globalist, how is it that the uber left in America wants to have America look like Europe? Did you see anything over there that would cause you to say, yes, they're right, we need to be more like Europe?
I saw very little, and if you had to ask me to specify, I doubt that I could.
How about are things expensive over there?
Everything is massively more expensive in Europe than it is here in the U.S., at least everything that I can think of. I think that the driving force behind those who support the move towards socialistic government, certainly those who support Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, is that they've never been outside the country. They have an imagined view of what the world outside our country is. If you think about going through 13 or more years in our public education system where you've been educated, you've been force-fed the fact that America's an evil country. It's an unfair country. We have taken advantage of the Indians and of the slaves, and now virtually all of our foreign policy, which to a certain extent is true, has not succeeded. We are viewed, certainly today, as unlike as the President Obama had promised, we are not viewed in a positive view by the rest of the world. So if you grow up thinking America's an awful place, it's unfair, we have income disparity, and so on and so forth, and you see these beautiful photos. Certainly, if you watch PBS, listen to NPR about how wonderful Europe is, you get a view that's maybe that's a better place to be. Very, very few people who hold that view have been to Europe.
Listen, I used to work for a fellow. His name was Tony Bailey, and Tony Bailey was a black guy, and he was from Great Britain. And what was fascinating about Tony Bailey's view of this, when he first came to the United States, he said we have racism in Western Europe, but not like we do in America. He said what they have there, though, he said it was every bit as insidious. It was classism, and so he was very graphic in describing if you're in the wrong class, or if you're in a lesser class, you're not going to get talked to by somebody in the next class up. It was all based on financial and position in life and what it is that you do. And so what it feels like there are folks in America that want to place us all in categories of race to start with, because everything is divided in race by the uber left, by the way. And those are the same folks that are also calling for in trying to lead by classism.
Well, you don't. Of course, you don't see that just in a visit, on a vacation. But what you do see is the results of that, which is on virtually every stop we saw dozens and dozens and dozens, and depend on where you went, of mostly men, occasionally women, but mostly men, standing around, kind of intimidating at times. Most of them smoking, not looking all that happy, because of the massively high unemployment rates that you have in Europe. So, the question, I'd just like to address this one thing as to why would folks want to go there or want us to be more like it? Though there are some people, certainly leaders, who have been to Europe and they know what's going on. What happens in Europe is it isn't the empowerment of those political leaders and those union leaders, and in some cases those corporate leaders. It gives them significantly more power in Europe and in a socialist world than they have in the United States. So if you want power and you're a politician, socialism is much, much preferable to capitalism.
So it's where everyone's equal, 98% of the people are equal, and we all are broke, but the 2% that wanted the power and caused it to be that way, they want it because they get the power.
Well, there's a lot of unhappiness there, and you see the unemployment.
Yeah, it sounds like an American city. Listen, on the line with us, we've got a candidate for state representative down in a special election in the 80th that is the result of former state representative Cindy Gamrett being removed from office. Bill Sage, welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Hello, Mike Hewitt.
Am I saying your name right? Is it Bill Sage?
You're saying it right, yeah.
Good. How many candidates are in that race with you, Bill?
7 at the moment.
Okay, so you're thinking someone may pull out in the next few business days, or?
Well, it's kind of too late. Their name's on the ballot, so even if they go into stalemate, their names are still on the ballot.
Right.
You know, Mike.
I understand that there are 2 or 3 names that are considered viable. I don't know if that's a fair statement or not. I've genuinely not looked at it, but this is kind of the comments I got back from some folks in your area, that there are 2 or 3 names that are viable candidates. You were one of the names listed, and that there are several candidates that are not actually doing anything that would cause anyone to say that's an active candidate. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I believe I'm one of those active candidates. I don't have the big money backing me, but or the corporate money, but yeah, I'd say that's a fairly accurate statement, Mike.
Usually primary, and this is a primary, is that right?
This is a primary.
And so it's a primary being held in the general election.
For the Republican Party now.
For the Republican Party.
Is there a Democrat primary going on at the same time?
No, there's only one candidate in the Democratic race. So there's no primary there, no.
Now, when is the general election for the State House 80th seat?
November 3rd. It's next Tuesday.
No. Well, that's the general. That's a primary for you. When is it going to be decided? What are you?
I believe it's March 8th, if I'm not mistaken.
March 8th. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, other than Cindy Gamrat's missteps, what are the issues that are dominating that debate down there?
Well, no taxes, fines, or fees, and that was one of my campaign pledges. Property rights, property taxes. I'm going after that.
Okay.
If I get into office, that's one of the first things I'm going to do. I'm going to draft legislation to get rid of that 1.5% multiplication factor you get on your property tax every year.
So does that mean you're probably not in favor of Governor Snyder's gas tax?
I had a plan. That's really stupid because it was so simple to fix that. Okay,
yep.
And I can't. And the simplicity of it is so stupid; it astounds me.
I'm
against any taxes, fines, or fees. We're spent. We're living paycheck to paycheck. I'm one of the shrinking middle class anymore. In the last 5-6 years, the value of my dollar went down by 30-40%. And if you can't see that when you go buy a steak or a lobster or whatever, I mean, you're blind.
Obama administration says we've got minimal to no inflation. That's what they said. But then they didn't count food, and they didn't count food, gas, medical, or education. But other than that, everything was pretty constant.
Everything is constant. No, electric bill, that's gone up. So
well,
insurance in the last 5 years.
Insurance at every level.
Everything that we actually need,
level.
It's all went up really, really greatly.
Including that your fault insurance.
Listen, let me do the litmus test that everyone hates. Are you pro-choice or pro-life?
I'm pro-life. life, man. I got 6 kids.
Love that.
I had my first wife threaten me that she was going to have an abortion.
Oh.
I married her because of that. Yeah. No, seriously, I'm not kidding. I'm
Okay. And that turned into 5 more.
That was from my second wife.
I see. Okay.
The first one I didn't stay. We ended up in a divorce, needless to say. But you know what? She's my daughter that I saved.
Sure.
I've got a new grandbaby that's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I saved him too, you know.
Yeah, there's nothing more precious than grandbabies.
I like that story. I love that story.
Oh, you haven't heard it yet, man. It goes a little further than that. But, yeah.
Tell me this: who are you supporting for president?
Well, belief-wise, I'm a Trump.
Okay.
And the reason why, I believe in the Lord firmly in my heart. I'm part of the body of Christ. And I'm not perfect, but I'm a pretty good guy. But I like Trump because he's got a lot of cojones. He's gonna stand there and fight the establishment just like I've been doing for the last 4 years. And I don't know if you're familiar with my record or not, Mike, but I'm the guy you need in there because I've been defending the U.S. Constitution for 4 or 5 years now successfully. When you hear about the Pledge of Allegiance back in the schools, it's my bill. I wrote it. Dave Agim originally sponsored it. We had a conference of 9 people that wrote the Constitution of Michigan legislation that renews constitutional studies in our schools.
Right.
Dave Agim, that man, he sponsored the bill, and Randy Heckman was in that conference. He's endorsed me. He ran for Senate. You remember Randy focused on the family, I think, or something like that?
Yep, I know him. Did Dave Agim endorse you, by the way?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
He's involved.
Okay.
And not only that, but Dr. Richard Ziley endorsed me because he was also in that Constitution of Michigan conference where we drafted that legislation that's currently in the House right now to renew constitutional studies.
When you say you drafted the legislation, now you have not been in the legislature, so you're telling me you're a citizen that helped craft a bill?
I'm the founder of Constituting Michigan and the founder of Reconstituting America, which renews our U.S. constitutional law through our youth. And not only that, I've got other actions that we don't have time for to renew this republic. I've been representing the people of the 80th District now and Michigan for 5 years.
Have you been
successfully? I did the Michigan Liberty Preservation Resolution. That's me, man. Right to Work Resolution. That's me.
How many doors have you knocked on, Bill? I put my consultant.
Probably maybe 1,000 because I just haven't had time. I could use some help if anybody out there wants to help me.
I get it, but when I put my political consultant hat back on, I know that the person that's going to win is the guy or the girl that sent out the most direct mail pieces and knocked on the most doors.
I agree.
I mean,
again,
that's
I
just
don't have that Betsy DeVos money back in me.
Hard to believe she wouldn't back you.
I wonder why.
Yeah, that's too funny. Listen, how do folks find your campaign? Do you have a website or Facebook or anything that people can look you up?
Absolutely. You can Bill Sage. I've got two Facebooks out there. The one that's got the most activity is the one to go to. Send me a message.
Okay.
It's the website is Bill Sage 4. Okay, don't write it out. That's BillSage4Country.org. That's the website. And
very nice.
Get a hold of me there as well.
Bill, I'm hearing music, so that means our time is up. But thank you very, very much, and keep up the good work, my friend.
Hey, if you want, maybe we can get together again later and tell you about some of these other actions.
We'll talk again.
Election. Okay.
We'll talk again. Thank you very much.
See ya.
So, Jim, in our last 25 seconds, where are you going to move when you move to Europe? Which country? Did you pick one yet?
I'm going to stick around here for a while, folks. Gotta love the USA.
Are you telling me you're not going back?
I may visit.
What was your favorite place?
Actually, the Greek Isles were pretty nice.
Beautiful.
Because there were a few Greeks there, and it was all tourists, all
very,
people.
Very, very nice. Folks, find us at Facebook /The Mike Hewitt Show. See you next Wednesday.